All right, let's do the thing. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thanks for putting in all the effort to come and teach a, ignorant person like myself.
Not the word I've used. Okay. It's tricky doing this every 2 weeks because we have these huge chunks of text.
Right?
Like when we did all of Leviticus in 1 week. We're going to be cherry picking because there's a lot in 1 Samuel that isn't necessarily like easy to make the soundbite for the Come Follow Me curriculum, right? There's no like, I can do hard things like when Saul killed himself. Like there's a lot that we're just probably not going to get to. But here's the really cool stuff from the first part here. The purpose of 1 Samuel is to bridge the gap from the time of the judges to the time of the monarchy. So under Joshua, so Moses dies, Joshua's the leader, triumphant entry across the Jordan into the promised land, and they have this sort of Moses-y theocracy going on, and then after Samuel, they're ruled by judges. The word there is shophatim. Judges is not a great translation, but it is the traditional translation. A better rendering would be something like chieftains or warlords. And I like to imagine Samson with like, a gold-plated AK and a leopard skin. Anyway, so those guys are tribal chieftains. And then we arrive at Samuel explaining how a monarchy happened, supposedly happened. So here's the other thing that's weird. We talked a couple months ago about how there's this general degradation in the ability to communicate with God. So Moses talks to God face to face. Actually, so Noah, I think, does too. Abraham does. Isaac, ? I'm not sure about. Jacob doesn't. Jacob hears voices. Joshua has dreams. And then we pick up the story with Moses, who initially talks to bushes and clouds and such. It says he talked to God face to face in a couple of occasions, but then Joshua doesn't. The judges speak for God, or hear a voice, or put a wet piece of fleece on the ground, which is that century's Ouija board. And Samuel, by the time he's a boy, which we'll look at in a minute, is the first person in centuries of storyline who can actually talk to God. So let's pick it up in 1 Samuel 1, because the first, it's named for Samuel, and it's the rise of David. But for the first 2 chapters, the most important person in this book is actually Hannah, for some very cool reasons. Do you have, what translation do you have?
Using the ESV right now,
Okay.
but I gotta get to.
I've got an NRSV right here that we can work on. Work from, I should say. Because ESV, okay. Here's my soapbox. King James is a straight up dumpster fire in 1 Samuel. It's not good. ESV, as a matter of policy, wants to be King Jamesy. So I can't speak for how much they're going to stick the landing on this one.
Yeah.
But let's try it. Okay, it starts out, there's a dude from Ramathaim of the Zoophites in the hill country. He's got 2 wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Hannah is like blessed or wealthy, rich. Peninnah is pearl. So they, the tabernacle, we should actually talk about this. The Ark of the Covenant lives in a tabernacle still. And the tabernacle has stopped moving. It's now in Shiloh. So all the priestly stuff, all the sacrifices and everything are going on in this place called Shiloh, which is Levite country. And it says that Elkanah, son of Jeroham. So Elkanah and his two wives are going up to worship. Elkanah offers a sacrifice. He gave portions to his wife Peninnah and all her sons and daughters, but to Hannah he would give only one portion only, even though Hannah is his favorite, but the Lord had closed her womb. And her rival, to make her more miserable, would taunt, this is verse 6, would taunt her that the Lord had closed her womb. This happened year after year. Every time she went up to the house of the Lord, the other would taunt her, so that she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, "Why are you crying? Why aren't you eating? Why are you sad? Am I not more devoted to you than 10 sons?" After they had eaten and drunk, Hannah rose, and the priest, Eli, was sitting at a seat near the doorpost of the temple. Okay. You priest should be high priest. And here's our first, sort of intervening character who's going to show up for a long time. Eli is sitting at a stool by the post of the temple. The high priest would sit on a bench in the entryway of the tabernacle. Did I say temple? Should be tabernacle. And they would adjudicate cases. Yeah. So he'd literally just spend the day sitting out in the sun, listening to people, bicker stuff. He had some judicial power. Okay, she makes a vow. We know the story, right? She makes a vow, look upon the suffering of your maidservant. Here's the thing. She's going to pray for this. Eli's going to say ask her if she's drunk, because, praying under your breath is not common in this century. She's going to jump down his throat, he's going to bless her, and she's going to have the kid. Okay, here's the point. Chapter 2. Now, the King James won't show this in a poetic format, but ESV, and for that matter, NRSV should. Do you want to give us what you got there? Just for chapter 2. We're just going to do chapter 2 up to through 10.
All right. And Hannah prayed and said, "My heart exults in the Lord. My horn is exalted in the Lord. My mouth derides my enemies, because I rejoice in your salvation. There is none holy like the Lord, for there is none besides you. There is no rock like our God. Talk no more so very proudly, let not arrogance come from your mouth, for the Lord is a God of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed. The bows of the mighty are broken, but the feeble bind on strength. Those who were full have hired themselves out for bread, but those who were hungry have ceased to hunger. The barren has borne 7, but she who has many children is forlorn. The Lord kills and brings to life. He brings down to Sheol and raises up. The Lord makes poor and makes rich. He brings low and he exalts. He raises up the poor from the dust. He lifts the needy from the ash heap to make them sit with princes and inherit a seat of honor. For the pillars of the Lord are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world. He will guard the feet of his faithful ones, but the wicked shall be cut off in darkness, for not by might shall a man prevail. The adversaries of the Lord shall be broken to pieces. Against them he will thunder in heaven. The Lord will judge the ends of the earth. He will give strength to his king and exalt the horn of his anointed."
Perfect, thank you. I'm actually really glad we went with ESV there.
Oh, yeah?
Because in their attempt to capture the poetic flow of King James, they create imagery that a more literal translation would just not have. Like NRSV will drop this on its ass. It's not poetic, it's just accurate. Okay, so here's the big idea about the prayer or the Song of Hannah. 1, it contains the major themes that will play out over the course of the book of 2 Samuel. The way I like to think of it is that as the age of judges comes to its close and the age of prophets begins, the inaugural prophecy is hers. She is foreshadowing or forecasting everything that's going to happen for the rest of the book. This is the story of Samuel and Saul and David, and for that matter, Jonathan. and all the people and their hunger to have a king, they will live out the flow of these ideas. Now, these seem like regular, like, cool platitudes. This isn't something true today that wasn't true yesterday. But she spells it out in this poetic form that A is echoed at the end of 2 Samuel by David himself. So they create bookends. The other thing that happens is some of these ideas get lifted and employed in the story of Mary being told by Gabriel that she will conceive a son and call his name Jesus. This is a super important literary unit. If you ever had that experience in school where they make you memorize poetry and it's just like, a handful of really important ones from history, this is one. If the class was biblical literature, this is a big one. It echoes throughout the rest of the book, throughout the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, which used to be one book, but they got chopped up because of how Christians, initially medieval Jews and later Christians, had a set scroll length that they could turn into a book. But this is the setup. This is the, another way to think about this that's fun is this is the Star Wars title crawl. Okay, the age of prophets and monarchy starts with this. And then we meet the man himself. And Samuel is a big deal in the history of the nation, in the story flow. He's a rock star. I mean, he's no Moses, he's no Abraham, but he's accessible because he's modern to this age. And so, let's look at some really cool stuff that happens in 3. Whoa, hang on, I gotta back up. No, this may actually continue in 2. Oh, yeah. So he goes to live in the tabernacle in Shiloh, and Eli takes him in. Eli's sons are scoundrels. So, this is going to cause a lot of trouble for Eli.
Worthless sons.
Is that what it says?
They're called in the ESV.
In King James, I think it actually transliterates the Hebrew word. It's like they were of no value, or it actually puts a Hebrew word there. Sons of Belial, that's what it is. Sons of Belial. They were. It doesn't even bother to translate. Yeah, they're worthless. So he takes on these jobs, and let's pick it up in 3. Young Samuel was in the service of the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. Prophecy was not widespread. One day Eli was asleep in his usual place. His eyes had begun to fail, and he could barely see. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was sleeping in the temple of the Lord where the ark of God was. The Lord called out to Samuel. They keep anachronistically using temple. That's an odd quirk of the JPS. The Lord called out, what does he say? The Lord called out to Samuel. He answered, I am coming. He ran to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. But he replied, I didn't call you. Go back to sleep. So he went back and lay down, and again the Lord called Samuel. Samuel rose and went to Eli and said, Here I am, you called me. I didn't call you, my son. Go back to sleep. This goes on. And the point is, only after the fact does the high priest realize that God is talking to the boy. The high priest isn't the one spoken to, because the voice of God is rare. King James says it is precious, which is a problem, because precious did mean rare 4 centuries ago, but now it's a little bit different. Anyway, he's called, he grows up, and then we jump into this issue. It's Israel versus the Philistines. The Bronze Age is just ending, and the Iron Age is just beginning. Philistines have iron, Israelites do not, because the Philistines are able to blockade Israelite trade and tradesmen from being able to develop iron technology. In this situation, they lose a battle, and the ark gets taken by the Philistines. Now, the Philistines take the Ark of the Covenant and they go put it in a temple. The text says to Dagon. Every translation says a temple of Dagon. There's some question of whether or not Philistines worship Dagon in this time. But the point is, they put it in their temple. That's what you do. You get booty, you offer it to your god. And then their statue in their temple keeps getting broken and vandalized at night. And people start getting sick. And according to the story, they can't get rid of it fast enough. They haul it to the Israelite border and ditch it. And then it gets moved around a couple of places. I don't think it goes directly back to Shiloh. But anyway, that's what's going on in those verses. And then 8 happens, and 8 is the pivot point. We're moving right along. Can we hop into 8:10? Just do 8:10 to 20. Saul shows up, and he is the ideal leader. He's a military leader. Everyone is. Everyone we care about is. Samuel grew old. He appointed his sons as judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel. But his sons didn't follow in his ways. They were bent on gain. They accepted bribes and subverted judges. All the elders of Israel assembled and came to Samuel at Ramah and said unto him, You have grown old. Your sons don't follow in your ways. Give us a king to govern us like all other nations. Samuel was displeased that they said, Give us a king to govern us. He prayed to the Lord, and the Lord said to Samuel, Heed the demand of the people in everything they say to you. It's not you they've rejected, it's me that they've rejected as their king. Okay. A king that we might be like all the nations. There's something hiding here that we moderns miss. If you are ruled by tribal chieftains, you're not a nation. You're sand-eating Bedouin. If you have something worth protecting, if you have a land and an identity, that means somebody else wants it. And a king in this time is like a national big brother. The king is a protector. This is the guy who we can all afford to not have farming from sunup to sundown, so he can solve community problems. We'll handle, medicine and artisanship and the food supply, but we're going to support this guy and give him resources to go solve community problems. Create work crews to dig irrigation ditches. Assemble militias to defend the flocks, stuff like that. But you only do this if you have something to protect. And if you're just shepherds governed by tribal chieftains, you don't. You're amorphous. You have no borders. And so, it's not about being like everyone else. It's about being somebody. It's about being an actual nation for once.
Wanting to be part of the cool crowd.
Not just the cool crowd, being legitimate.
Yeah.
Like being able to have a seat at the table. Because here's the thing. There's a hierarchy, right? People who have kings, they are organized, and they are prestigious. Small little war bands being governed by local judges, local warlords, is what they've been. Joshua's grand plan to take over the land in the name of God is going pretty poorly after a couple of centuries.
Yeah.
And so they can't really establish themselves unless they get someone to establish them. That's the move. That's the tactical decision for doing this. So let's read from 8 to 10, if you would not mind. Chapter 8, verses 8 to 10. Or is it 10 to?
That's okay. Chapter.
Hang on, what did I say? Chapter 8, verses 10 to 20 is what we want.
Alright, so this is, Samuel's warning against kings. So Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking for a king from him. He said, These will be the ways of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them to his chariots and to be his horsemen and to run before his chariots. And he will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and commanders of 50s, and some to plow his ground and to reap his harvest and to make his implements of war and the equipment of his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and vineyards and olive orchards and give them to his servants. He will take the tenth of your grain and all your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will take your male servants.
Wow. Okay, sorry. Every time that thing says servants, remember, this is, ESV comes from the evangelical end of the spectrum of not just politics, but the narratives the Bible is allowed to tell. And slavery is not one of the ones they like to remember. So every time you just said servant, the
slave.
text says
Think
slave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, he will take your male servants and female servants and the best of your young men and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take the tenth of your flocks and ye shall be his slaves. And in that day you will cry out because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves, but the Lord will not answer you in that day. But the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and he said, No, but there shall be a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations, and that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles.
Okay, this is another thing that we Westerners think of. A Westerner hears king, and they picture Henry VIII. I need a gouty, overweight man to make up churches when it's convenient for him, right? But they're thinking Aragorn from the Lord of the Rings. When they say fight at our head, that's the real deal. King is the front line.
Yeah.
That dude goes out to fight, and this is a foreshadowing too. This is really interesting, because later on in the Bathsheba incident, it's not fair that the scandal is named for her, she didn't do anything wrong, but it starts with an explanation of the battle that David was not there to fight.
Right.
He was in Jerusalem. It tells us he was in Jerusalem, and we're like, okay, weird detail, because in the next verse it says he was standing on his own roof. We could have gathered he was in Jerusalem. No, they're telling us he's not at the front line, that the king should be at the front line. This section is also really important for the history of European Christianity, because when the King James hit shelves, the Geneva Bible had already been out for 100 years. And it was the favorite Bible of Puritans. That can't be right. Isn't there another I?
Yeah, I think that's right. Puritans, yeah.
Puritans. Okay. Puritans were a huge buzzkill even then, but they were really interesting because they did actually some stuff that was pretty cool and informs the way law works in our country even now. One of the things that, they did all the, don't celebrate holidays and deny yourself of all celebration or whatever. But they also had female preachers, which is a thing the Church of England was, put out about. But the whole point of bringing this up is the Geneva Bible was really the first English study Bible. The margins were packed with all sorts of explanatory notes that were the cutting-edge biblical scholarship of the day. And this section had a whole paragraph about how monarchy as an abstract concept is bad for humans, which was not something King James could really support or go along with. It's a big reason that he funded the creation of the King James Bible. Not really a new translation, it's a revision of a revision of a revision, but the hottest Bible on the market for going on 100 years was very anti-monarchy, and its battleground was this chapter. So they get a king. Samuel is led to this guy named Saul. He's the dude. Everybody loves him. He's big, he's handsome, he's successful, but he has two critical flaws. One, he doesn't always do what he says he'll do. And two, if he screws up, it's somebody else's fault. The dude chronically cannot take responsibility for his own mistakes. And so he goes out and he wins a lot of battles, and then things start to fall apart. There's some question of the extent to which what we now call mental illness may play into this, because by the time that David shows up. Saul seems to be in a depression, at least a depressive episode. Anyway, he starts losing battles. Samuel laments that this is the king, and he comes to him, and he says, Samuel comes to Saul and says, "You're done. You're not going to be the king. The Lord's going to replace you. You're not a reliable tool in the Lord's hands." And at the very end of that, the Goliath situation comes about. Did I say it was 17? Yes. Let's go to 17. Saul's not ready to die yet. That's going to happen later. So cool. Okay, 17. This is the setup. And what I want to do is before we meet the shepherd, he has been introduced, but before we meet the shepherd, I want to talk about the champion. What's the word? What's the word that's translated there? In 17:4, he is called champion. Almost every English translation calls Goliath the Philistine champion. But the literal translation of what's happening there is the man between the armies. If this guy wins, we don't all have to fight. I've seen it alternately translated as who fights in the space between armies, but the idea is the same. This is the dude who is not part of the army. He's a special unit. Okay, can we actually just start with 17:2? Will you just grind through 17:2, and I want to get from 2 through 11. So we'll end at 12.
All right. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered and encamped in the valley of Elah and drew up their line of battle against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. And there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of...
Different textual traditions will maintain different heights for him. So the tradition that King James and thus ESV come from, I think holds a 9-foot height, but there's one tradition that holds a 6.5-foot height. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, interesting. He had a helmet of bronze on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of that coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And his shield bearer went before him. He stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why have you come out to draw up for battle? Am I not a Philistine, and are you not servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves, and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. If I prevail against you and kill him, then ye shall be our servants and serve us." And the Philistines said, "I defy the ranks of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistine, they were dismayed and greatly afraid.
Okay.
Yeah, so is a shekel of bronze. Obviously, bronze and iron do not weigh the same. So a shekel is obviously... what is a shekel?
So it's a weight and measure. So this is so interesting. In a place where actual like fiat currency is not widely used, you would use the equivalent weight. So a shekel of bronze is however many coins or lumps of bronze you have that equal the measure shekel. So I don't know how much it is.
So a shekel is a shekel. It's just, so if you give a shekel of bronze versus a shekel of iron, it would just be more of one or the other
Yeah,
to make one
exactly.
shekel. Gotcha.
Exactly.
Okay. That makes
Yeah.
sense.
Here's what is so cool about this. It's lost to us in the translation. But bronze, the word for bronze in Hebrew, sounds like the word for snake. And his male is actually scale. Everything about our introduction, so we see a giant guy who's got chachos carrying around his stuff, but an ancient Hebrew reader, or more likely listener to someone who's hearing this performed, is just hearing about a snake. It's another talking snake story. Like the third one so far.
Yeah.
So everything about this guy, he's sneaky and he's shady and he's covered in bronze scales. And he shows up and he challenges the king of Israel. And this kid shows up. Let's jump to 1732. So now David meets the king. And he says, let me at it. I'll read this one because it's going to go on for a little bit. 32. David said to Saul, let no man's courage fail him. Your servant will go and fight that Philistine. And Saul said to David, you can't go to that Philistine and fight him. You're a boy, and he's been a warrior since his youth. David replied to Saul, your servant has been tending his father's sheep, and if a lion or bear came and carried off an animal from the flock, I would go over it and fight it and rescue it from its mouth. And if it attacked me, I would seize it by the beard and strike it down and kill it. Your servant has killed lion and bear, and that uncircumcised Philistine will end up like one of them, for he has defied the ranks of the living God. The Lord, David went on, who saved me from lion and bear, will also save me from the Philistine. Go, Saul said to David, and may the Lord be with you. Saul clothed David in his own garment. He placed a bronze helmet on his head and fastened a breastplate upon him. David girded with his sword over his garment and tried to walk, but was not used to it. And David said to Saul, I can't wear these. I'm not used to them. So David took them off. He took a stick, picked a few smooth stones from the wadi, put them in his pocket with a shepherd's bag, sling in hand, and went toward the Philistine. The Philistine, meanwhile, was coming closer to David, preceded by his shield bearer. When the Philistine caught sight of David, he scorned him, for he was a boy, ruddy and handsome. The Philistine called out to David, Am I a dog that you're coming against me with a stick? The Philistine cursed David by all his gods, and the Philistine said to David, Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the field. And David replied, Now this is... We talked about how this story is taking place here. Actually, it's taking place here. So Saul has been king. David is not king yet. But this was compiled over here, in and around the Babylonian exile. David has a lot of these Captain America moments where he's saying the right thing that a king should say. Now, it's going to come before a fall, and we'll see that later. He's not going to be a great king by the end of it. But right now, he's a wonder boy. And so, when I read his unwavering faith in his own survival, I hear propaganda more than anything. That's just my own criticism.
It's part of the mythos. I mean, think of us and George Washington.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that painting of him praying before a battle that didn't get popular until the 50s. Yeah, you're right. It's part of the mythos, which is maybe the most helpful way I can think about it. So he's gonna roll up and say, you come against me with sword and spear, but I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the ranks of Israel, whom you have defied. This very day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I will kill you and cut off your head and give the carcass of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth. And all the earth shall know that there is a God in Israel. And this whole assembly shall know that the Lord can give victory without sword or spear. For the battle is the Lord's, and he will deliver you into our hands. Okay, he nails him with the slingshot. Cuts off his head. Side note, can we take a detour to 1 Chronicles 20? Now, 1 Chronicles is really funny, and we often skip it in our transit through the Old Testament because it's a retread of other material that exists more explicitly and more clearly elsewhere in the Bible, and also less obviously pro-Davidic dynasty. There's a very clear bent to the way Chronicles presents things normally. 20 and 5. But in this one instance, something weird's going on. And 5. Do you have it?
Yeah.
Okay, pick up at 4. This is the Chronicles version of the story we just read.
And after this there arose war with the Philistines at Gezer. Then Sibbecai the Hushathite struck down Sippei, who was one of the descendants of the giants, and the Philistines were subdued. And there was again war with the Philistines, and Elhanan, the son of Jair, struck down Lami, the brother of Goliath, the Gittite, the shaft of whose spear was like a weaver's beam. And there was again war at Gath, where there was a man of great stature who had 6 fingers on each hand and 6 toes on each foot. That's an interesting little aside. 24 in number, and he was also descended from the giants. And when he taunted Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shimei, David's brother, struck him down. These were descended from the giants in Gath, and they fell by the hand of David and by the hand of his servants.
Okay. This is so weird. So, in some translations, it's a different guy killing Goliath, and in some translations, it's wiping out all of the giants. But remember how the giants came into the story? Way back it was right before the Noah and the flood story. We're cruising along, we're approaching Noah and the flood, and there's this weird little 8-verse aside about how divine beings and human women gave birth to a race of Nephilim, who were supposed to be the ancestors of the mighty giants. And now we're just bookending the existence of giants. That was a weird thing when it happened back in Genesis. And these guys are calling back to it yeah, everybody knows giants. And now there are none. Which, there's this really interesting channel, YouTube channel called The Bible Project. They're an evangelical church out of Portland. And they do a lot of really cool, Bible explainer videos where they're it's just telling you, here's what was the story in this chapter. Yeah. Right? They're not necessarily out here being oh, this means this, you gotta believe that. They're just interested in telling you what the text is saying. And then on their other podcast channels, they'll talk about what that means for us. So one time they had a podcast episode that I thought was really cool where they talk about David and the giants. So the characteristic of the giants is that they were born from divine beings taking human women. It is an act of violence. And giants are described as being violent, destructive creatures who take what they want. All up to this point of the book, any mention of giants, they're dangerous. And then we get to Chronicles, and the last of them is wiped out. Ostensibly by David, but definitely by David's government and friends. So David, giants happen. David wipes out what? Giants. And then, by the end of it, David sees a woman bathing on the roof and has her husband murdered to take her.
So look at that. Full
David
circle.
becomes a giant. And his tragedy is not his fall from grace, it's the depths of the fall. I don't know that that's text or subtext, but these guys who do this channel are really good at noticing these funky patterns that I don't notice. They're actually the ones that pointed out the snake setup. So anyway, if we take for granted the version of this where David kills the giant, he kills the giant snake, then this ends up being this interesting retelling of the Garden of Eden, because this time humanity beats the snake. And there's not nothing to this idea that David is a new, let's go over here, and actually let's pick a color that's distinct from the others. Let's go purple for this one. David is a new Adam. That's not coming out of nowhere. We're just not used to seeing this story be part of it. Because later on, when the idea of a Messiah develops and becomes widespread, he is thought of as a Davidic, a descendant of David, healer, restorer. The Messiah is tied to David's house and David's mythology very closely. Centuries after this, when Messiahhood becomes a popular strain of thought within the religion of Israel. It's not Judaism yet, but within community beliefs, the future messianic king is absolutely Davidic and is a new kind of man. And so to see it play out in this odd retelling of human versus snake is weird. I had never heard this be the argument for that. There's a million other things that are the argument for that, but connecting this to the case, I was very impressed by. Okay. I ran out of stuff to write on the board. I ran out of time to write stuff on the board. Let's just take a look here. Good gosh. This coming week, we're already into 2 Samuel.
Yeah, we don't do the Old Testament justice.
How would we though? Actually, this is a good time to have that philosophical discussion, because there's only one more thing to talk about after this. How could we? It's distant from us.
Well, it is hard, right? So that's why I love coming here, right? Because you provide some great context to understand, a lot of things that don't necessarily make sense from a modern American's perspective, right?
Yeah.
And typical church, you're not gonna get that. So even if you devoted more time, you're not necessarily gonna get into that.
And was that the purpose? Here's the funny thing. The correlation movement in the 80s that gave everybody the same manuals, and actually was also the first time we stopped having all-female Sunday school presidencies. That movement went a long way toward regulating and bringing everybody onto the same page as far as here's the official teaching. But it did away with the days where local Sunday school presidencies could purchase or write their own curriculum.
Yeah.
There was so much autonomy at the Sunday school, at the ward level. In fact, before that they had district Sunday schools. But the ward Sunday school used to have fundraisers and their own budget, print their own textbooks. Which led, no doubt, to many a ward just studying Mormon doctrine for Sunday school in the 70s. So if the alternative is correlation or that, I'll take the homogeny.
Yeah. keeping that bar low.
I know, yeah.
Well, it is interesting. From my perspective, the one thing that I kind of struggle with the Old Testament, right, is what are we really trying to learn here? Because my personal opinion of the Old Testament, right, is it's the origin story of this birth of a blessed nation. And so, you're going to do things. I mean, even in the case of David, right, you're before his tragic fall, or however you want to describe his fall, right, you want to this great leader, the stand-up of what was going to become this great nation, because he was the slayer of giants and could do no wrong, and however you want to phrase it, right? There's a lot of things that go into this that you wonder, like, how much of it is, like you said previously, the propaganda to get this nation that's in captivity to buy into their divine destiny. Versus what is the actual truth story, and then even beyond that, what from a spiritual perspective should I actually take from this in my own life?
Yeah, it's funny because it's in an alien world. So here's for my part why I care about this stuff, because I've been asked my whole life, Ed, why does it matter? What does it matter that Goliath is described as a snake? What does that do for me? There's always some bro in a too tight shirt who says, how does that help me, Ed? And here's the thing, in the first place, at the very least, I'm going to do a Maslow's hierarchy thing. At the very least, it's the background for the New Testament. When Jesus calls himself the Son of Man, and as a general rule, strictly avoids calling himself the Son of God. When he calls himself the Son of Man, you should know that comes from Daniel. And you should be familiar enough with Daniel's apocalyptic literature and the story of Son of Man and Ancient of Days duking it out with the beast to understand the implication for the original audience at the very least. I mean, it has some cool implications for us, but I think that using this, I'm trying to think of like a pop culture example where, like, if you saw this, that other thing is much better. So the only one I can really think of is, there is an amazing series that used to be on Netflix. It was called The Frankenstein Chronicles. Sean Bean is an 1840s London river cop who's investigating disappearances. And he finds that Mary Shelley's novel, Frankenstein, is actually an autobiography. That's the setup. Okay. It's stellar, but also it's Sean Bean. You see his butt and then he dies. Like, this is the way his shows go, the way his movies go. It's such an interesting exploration of how he thinks the soul is tied to the body. Because what if the body is different bodies? Is the soul also composite? It's really interesting, but it loses something if you're not familiar with Shelley's novel. And Shelley's novel is really interesting, but it loses something if you're not familiar with Milton's Paradise Lost, which is really interesting, but doesn't make any kind of sense if you haven't read Genesis 1 to 3. And so you end up with this thing that's like enjoyable, but you can't really say you get it without a bunch of background stuff. And the New Testament is like that. Jesus is constantly referencing the Old Testament. For my part, it's worth it just for that. Now, there's some other stuff that's interesting that's going on. The other thing is, it lets us interrogate our biases. 2 R's in this?
Yeah.
Leviticus says, "Thou shalt not lie with a man the lying of a woman." It also says, don't eat oysters, don't eat owl meat, don't mix fabrics. And there's a lot of like weird minute rule. It also does this weird thing where like, if two guys are fighting and they injure a pregnant woman and she loses the baby but suffers no other injury, then you must pay her husband the same fee that you would have paid if you had killed their goat. But not the fee that you would have paid if you killed a human life. So, like, fetuses are like goat value, goat equivalent, yeah. Do I want to live by my life by this rule book? Does anyone? Because the people who believe some of the stuff I just said definitely don't believe all of the stuff I just said.
Well, that's an interesting question you just posed, Ed, because I would posit that there's a substantial number of church members that actually do want to live by a very strict interpretation, rules given to them, so they don't have to think.
Yes, absolutely. And here's the thing. Oh, new can of worms, Dave. Is the text univocal and infallible? Now, we believe the Bible to be the Word of God as far as it's translated correctly. So, right out of the gate, we don't subscribe to this thing, which is why the rest of Christianity and, the Department of Defense doesn't think we're Christian. But this is more insidious. This is hiding in there. Is Genesis and Joshua and Judges and Samuel and Esther, are they all telling the same story? Are they all speaking with one voice that can never contradict itself? You have to do some
pretty good mental gymnastics.
To make it work out, to the point where this is a famous thing that CSB, ESV, and NIV have to do, where in order to make the fact that the creation in Genesis 1 and the creation in Genesis 2 happen in different orders, they end up inserting clauses into Genesis 2 that say, well, all of that had happened before the animals came. Like, the grammar has to be tortured in order to make the two stories agree. And it's the first 2 chapters of the book. So, for me, the Old Testament is an exercise in interrogating people who have completely different beliefs, but who care about the stuff I care about.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool and valuable. I think that regardless of whether or not I believe something is a historical text, let's take Job as the example. I had a moment, because I grew up believing that Job was a 100% historical text. And the second somebody challenged me on that, I had a visceral reaction caused by or followed by a catch where I thought, wait, why one or the other? And why does it have to, it's weird that my faith depends on it being the one I'm already comfortable with.
Yeah.
It actually doesn't matter to me now. It doesn't matter whether it's a historical event that happened as described, or an allegory, or something in between, or some fourth thing I haven't thought of, because if I believe it's the Word of God, it can be whatever it wants to be, and it's my job to catch up. And as somebody who was classically trained in trying to smash it into a box I was already comfortable with, that change hurt. And it also kind of made it difficult for me to talk to everybody else who was trained in box smashing. So interrogating the biases is the second thing I love about the Old Testament. Also, this covers, why is Old Testament God so different? Well, the people writing about Old Testament God are real different.
Yeah.
They not like us, as the poet said. I don't think it's actually bad that this God is concerned with fairness above all. Fairness to the detriment of, people who would like mercy, but they asked for fairness. And it cuts both ways, and it comes back to bite them a lot. Now the other thing, for me, there's a great reason to study the Old Testament, if for nothing else. Notice, a lot of this is not very devotional. This is very technical, which is something I'm accused of being a lot. I have this idea in my head that I don't have a snappy, concise fortune cookie way of describing. That is what if getting out of my comfort zone and dealing with ideas that are foreign to me is actually the thing that drives my unlearning? Because I think a lot of gospel learning is unlearning.
I agree with you.
It's not, it's not just like downloading knowledge. Boy, would that be great. But it's unlearning. It's dismantling my humanity, sort of. Oh, yeah, you know what we should do? We should say the koan factor.
Okay, you've lost me on that one, Koan. You have to teach me about that.
Okay, so in Zen Buddhism, they have this series of poems and esoteric maxims. They're called koans. And the idea is the Zen master will give you a puzzle and you can't solve it with logic. You have to mull it over and you have to have some kind of emotional reaction to it to understand why we're talking about that thing. Because the idea is it is meant to short circuit your human logic so that as your humanity is stripped away, your Buddha divinity can take its place.
Okay.
It's actually like philosophically very clever. But the most famous one is like, what's the sound of one hand clapping? It's no sound, like anti-sound. So my favorite one, my absolute favorite one, is two monks are walking beside the river, and one sees a scorpion drowning in the river. He reaches in to scoop the scorpion out, and it stings him. He puts the scorpion on the river and then puts his burning hand in the water, and the other monk laughs and says, "Brother, do you not know it is the scorpion's nature to sting?" And the monk with his hand in the water, in pain, chuckles and says, "Do you not know it's my nature to help?" And so, it's a meditation on nature and how that drives your actions. I think there is value in studying these sort of alien, honestly kind of off-putting texts
Yeah.
for the sake of, not really having answers. In the words of the great poet Jordan McEwen, to live with the ambiguity is the sign of maturity.
I missed that from Jordan, but yeah, that's well said.
He's good. I could write a book of